I was turning 40 and I was sitting in my living room where I'm sitting right now, and it was garbage day. And I watched our older neighbor across the road taking his garbage. We live in 1959 bungalows, so our laneways are fairly long. You don't get them in the houses now. Like, we can fit probably 3 or 4 cars in our laneway. So he was walking his garbage from his door to the end of the driveway for pickup, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I come outside and I take my garbage and I bring it to the end of my driveway. And he says to me from across the road, "Hi, Aubyn, how are you?" And I had to take a deep breath before I answered my 80-year-old neighbor, who was not winded.
Oh, wow.
And I was winded.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, there is something really wrong with this. Why is it that my 80-year-old neighbor can do this and I can't do this?
Mm-hmm.
And I came inside and I was on the phone with a good friend of mine. And she said to me, "Aubyn, do you think maybe it's your heart?" And I thought, oh man, oh no, I think she's right.
Welcome to Heart with Anna. I am Anna Jaworski and the host of your program. We are in season 14, and I'm so happy you're here with us today. Today's show features a heart warrior, and our episode is entitled "When a Heart Warrior is Living in Heart Failure." And our guest is Aubyn Baker-Riley. Aubyn Baker-Riley is an adult who was born in 1963 with a bicuspid aortic valve and coarctation of the aorta. She had open heart surgery at 7 years of age to widen the coarctation, and she had ablations in 2005, 2016, and 2018. She is currently in heart failure. Welcome to Heart with Anna, Aubyn.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm so happy to have you on the show, especially since we were born in the same year.
That's cool.
I know.
Cool.
It really is cool. And you're born on my sister's birthday, so I am never going to forget your birthday.
I expect a birthday card.
Okay, we're going to have to make it happen. I was amazed to see that you're my age, because I know that people who were born the year that we were born were often not successful in making it to adulthood when they had a congenital heart defect. So I'm sure that you have really been watching pediatric cardiology as a field advancing while you've been growing up.
Yes, I have. Absolutely.
Yeah. So what was it like for you to have a bicuspid aortic valve and a coarctation of the aorta that wasn't even operated on for the first 7 years of your life? To me, that's just amazing. Do you remember having problems keeping up with your siblings or your friends?
Well, it's actually a funny question from my perspective, because I had my surgery at 7 years of age, but I actually don't remember a lot before I was 7 years of age. And why that is, apparently, is because of the surgery. Apparently, while being under general anesthetic itself, but also while being on the bypass machine, oftentimes people will talk about having memories that they lose. And because I was so young, I really don't have a lot of memories from before.
Wow.
There are some that stick in my head, and most of those would be what I would consider traumatic kind of events, like faintings and things that I could not do. I didn't take phys ed class in grade 1 or grade 2 because I was not yet able to do the same things as everyone else.
Okay.
I fainted in choir class because it was hot.
Oh, my goodness.
And they kept singing, apparently, and I was lying on the floor.
Oh, Aubyn, you poor thing.
Yeah. I mean, I remember those things, but I don't really remember being sick because it was how I always felt.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Sure.
Right? I was born with this, so I always felt like I felt. And then at 7, they, being my parents, told me that I was having surgery, and I went into the hospital feeling like I felt. And then I came out of the hospital after open heart surgery feeling horrible.
Oh, no.
Because, of course, open heart surgery is major.
Sure.
So in the beginning, I didn't understand. I really don't think I understood.
Right.
What was really going on. Like, they explained it to me as they would for a little kid.
Yeah, for a little kid, that's hard to understand, especially if you don't know anything else.
Yeah, exactly. So all I remember after the recovery timeframe, which by the way was over Halloween, which sucked because I couldn't go for Halloween. And that's a big thing in my world now. Like, Halloween is a big thing, always has been since then, I think.
Okay.
But after recovery, I remember saying to my mom, I'm fixed now, Mom. I'm fixed now, Mom. Don't worry about me. I can do this. I can run. I can jump. I can play. I can do, because I'm fixed now.
Wow. And your mom probably thought you were too, right?
Because that's what they told my mom.
Yes. Yes. Oh my goodness. Okay. So you're 7 years old. You think you're fixed after you recover. And I imagine it took you a little while to recover, because recovery from open heart surgery is not easy. Even if you are 7, you're not a rubber ball. You don't just bounce back like that. There's a recovery period. But then what shocked me was that you went from 1970, when you had your surgery, all the way to 2005 before you had another major procedure. That's 35 years. Were those healthy years for you?
Yes, pretty much. Pretty much. I was a normal kid, other than I had checkups at the pediatric hospital, obviously annually every year. And then I think it went to every 2 years after that. But Mom took care of those and told me when I was going, and we went and they did regular ECGs and all that sort of thing. But it was more like your checkup. Yes, sure. You're fine.
Yeah.
Go ahead. And beyond that, I did everything that normal kids did, really. I mean, I wasn't treated any differently. Sometimes I remember going to camp and Mom saying, Aubyn has a heart defect, but she's fine. She doesn't have any medications or anything like that. Don't worry about it.
But it made sense for her to do that, because if you were changing into your bathing suit, everybody saw a scar that might have alarmed them, right?
Well, actually, no. My mom had them do my scar on a bikini line. My scar is not an open heart zipper scar. My scar goes sideways along the line of what is now my bra. But back then, It was like where you would put a bikini or a bathing suit.
Wow. Okay, you're the first person that I've talked to who has had that. I've heard of people who are actually operated on the side or even more towards the back, depending on what their surgery is, if it was a valve replacement instead of something more midline. Wow. That was very forward thinking of your mom.
Absolutely. What she told them, as I understand it, was that I was a girl and she didn't want me to have that zipper that automatically told people I'd had open heart surgery.
Wow. That's amazing.
I know. And so it's like obviously on my left side, basically from where your heart is all the way around to the other side of my back. So depending on what bathing suit I was wearing as I got older or that kind of thing, you could possibly see it. But unless I wanted you to see it, you couldn't.
Well, yeah. And plus, by the time you were wearing that, your scar was probably, 7, 8, 9 years old. So it had probably faded quite a bit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it was actually a bit of a joke when I was a teenager, because you know how sometimes as a kid, especially as a teenage girl, you maybe unhook your bathing suit to get an even tan on your back, right? Or whatever. And somebody would see the scar and somebody would say, oh my gosh, Aubyn, you have a scar on your back. And I would occasionally say things like, oh my God, really? What's it look like? Like, no, it was there, which obviously was a lie. But because people say the darndest things, right? When they see something that's obviously a surgery scar, it's way different than any other kind of scar that a person would have. but people say silly things. And so sometimes just for the fun of it, I just joke with people,
Well, let's talk about your ablation. In 2005, you had an ablation. So what symptoms led you to go to the doctor and for them to say, oh, I think we need to do this surgery on you?
Turning 40. Seriously, in 2003, I was turning 40 and I was sitting in my living room where I'm sitting right now, and it was garbage day. And I watched our older neighbor across the road taking his garbage. We live in 1959 bungalows, so our laneways are fairly long. You don't get them in the houses now. Like, we can fit probably 3 or 4 cars in our laneway. So he was walking his garbage from his door to the end of the driveway for pickup, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I come outside and I take my garbage and I bring it to the end of my driveway. And he says to me from across the road, "Hi, Aubyn, how are you?" And I had to take a deep breath before I answered my 80-year-old neighbor, who was not winded.
Oh, wow.
And I was winded.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, there is something really wrong with this. Why is it that my 80-year-old neighbor can do this and I can't do this?
Mm-hmm.
And I came inside and I was on the phone with a good friend of mine. And she said to me, "Aubyn, do you think maybe it's your heart?" And I thought, oh man, oh no, I think she's right.
Texas Heart Institute were offering us a mechanical heart, and he said, "No, Dad, I've had enough. Give it to someone who's worthy."
My father promised me a golden dress to twirl in. He held my hand and asked me where I wanted to go.
Whatever strife or conflict that we experienced in our long career together was always healed by humor.
Heart to Heart with Michael. Please join us every Thursday at noon Eastern as we talk with people from around the world who have experienced those most difficult moments.
Tonight Forever by the Baby Blue Sound Collective.
I think what I love so much about this CD is that some of the songs were inspired by the patients.
Many listeners will understand many of the different songs and what they've been inspired by. Our new album will be available on iTunes, Amazon.com, Spotify.
I love the fact that the proceeds from this CD are actually going to help those with congenital heart defects.
Enjoy the music.
Home Tonight Forever.
You are listening to Heart with Anna. If you have a question or comment that you would like addressed on our show, please send an email to Anna Jaworski at anna@hearttoheartwithanna.com. That's anna@hearttoheartwithanna.com. Now, back to Heart with Anna.
Aubyn, before the break, we were talking with you about your medical history and being born in the 60s with a bicuspid aortic valve and a coarctation of the aorta. And we know that it was your heart. And that's why you needed the ablation. And we'll be talking about that a little bit more later. But first, I want to talk to you about your babies. Tell me about how many babies you've had and when you had them.
Okay. So in that time period, lots of things happen, right? This is a large period of time. So
right.
My first child was born in 1992. And at that time, 29 years of age, I was not being seen by anyone cardiac. I was considered a regular pregnancy, went through it with flying colors, was working full time as a children's aid worker at the time, came through till I think I worked up until maybe a month before my first child was born. And he was born, as I say, regular hospital, regular situation. I had an epidural, all of that was going totally normal and fine and regular until on the labor table, I went into supraventricular tachycardia.
Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. Did any of the doctors in the room know that you had been born with a heart defect?
Well, if they did, it certainly wasn't uppermost on their agenda, let's just say.
Oh my goodness.
So everybody and their uncle came into the room. We had, of course, the ECG and all these things. Exactly. It was crazy time.
Oh, wow.
Thankfully, everything went well. And my first child was born healthy, and they checked him out heart-wise, and they checked me out heart-wise. And it basically came down to, while pregnant, your heart is overworking, you're fine, no big deal. And nobody thought anything more of it, basically. So that was in 1992. In 1997, fast forward 5 years later, I'm pregnant for the second time. Now I'm 34. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I'm pregnant for the fourth time, second full term. I had 2 miscarriages in the middle.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
That's really rough.
It is. Absolutely. Absolutely. And so in 1997, second full term pregnancy, I was now high risk.
Right. And you should have been high risk the first time, but
well,
who knew?
Yeah, not until the very end. Kind of like spot on at the end. This time around, they had me at the high risk doctor, high risk nursery. Everything was different.
Sure.
Everything was different.
Well, and don't you think maybe you were more high risk also because you'd had those 2 miscarriages?
Possibly. I was also 34 instead of 29.
Yeah.
Other things had happened in my life in that time frame that probably meant that they were watching other things as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a totally different kind of pregnancy. No epidural. They wanted me to be in the operating room. No, I was in the operating room with gas.
Oh.
In case.
Wow. Okay.
That was the wording, was in case.
Yikes. Okay.
Second child, also born healthy. I was healthy. Everything seemed fine. And at that point, I saw a doctor one time at the Heart Institute here in Ottawa about 6 months after my second child was born to make sure that everything was fine. And it was. At that point, everything was fine.
Okay.
Or so we thought.
Oh, wow. Did you decide that you wanted to have more children after that?
No. At that point, my husband and I agreed for all kinds of reasons, not specifically for that reason, but I was 34.
Sure.
And yes, for all kinds of reasons, we said that's it. And number 2 was it. So he went and got the vasectomy so that I wouldn't have to do surgery because, as we obviously know, I'd already done that, right?
Yeah.
And so his thought was, I can do this.
Right.
Because this is easier for me than you.
Absolutely. Well, do you think that your pregnancies may have had anything to do with the arrhythmias that you developed later on?
You know, it's hard to say. It's definitely possible. Pregnancies are certainly hard on your heart, as we are aware. They're hard on normal, if you want to call them normal, people's hearts. So certainly someone with my heart conditions, it may very well be that it caused some of the problems later in life. It may have been the trauma that I had in those ensuing years. It may just have been age. It's anybody's guess, really.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
In hindsight, I would have my children. But if I had known that it was going to cause the problems later in life, I don't know. I don't know what I would have chosen.
So it's kind of a blessing that you didn't know.
Exactly. To me and other people I've talked to in my age group, we didn't know what they know now.
Sure.
They know a lot more now. And given that option now, they can make different choices. We didn't know.
Sure.
And we're still not really sure.
Exactly. And every person is so different, and everyone's heart defects are so different. Even another person who might have a coarctation and might have a bicuspid aortic valve might have a completely different medical history than you do.
Absolutely.
Okay. So you had this first ablation, and it seemed to be really successful. But then all of a sudden, it seems like recently you've needed 2 more ablations, and now you're in heart failure. So what do they think is causing the arrhythmias, and how are they affecting your quality of life?
That is the very big question. I mean, We had a missed ablation in 2004. So what I mean by that is they went in to do the ablation, went into the heart, and decided that where my problem was too close to other important things in there, that they didn't want to play around in there. And what I mean by that is the Ottawa Heart Institute has an amazing heart arrhythmia lab, and they were getting a new one. And so the decision was made to come back out of my heart without trying in 2004 and waiting for the new lab.
Wow. Well, then that was good, because
Yes.
you mustn't have been having life-threatening arrhythmias, or else they would have gone forward anyway.
Well, they put me on this wonderful drug called amiodarone, and I say that with a huge grain of salt.
Yep. I can understand, because I understand there are side effects with that drug.
Absolutely. It was awful. It was awful.
Yep.
Of course, the option was to have a heart attack.
Yeah. Yikes.
So, that was pretty much my option at that point. And obviously that comes with its own issues. So amiodarone it was.
Right.
But it is a really, really awful drug. And I understand that it's necessary at times, but that year was a write-off in many, many ways for me. Lowered energy level. I couldn't go out in the sun, and I'm a sun worshiper.
Oh my gosh, that's right. I forgot. That has photosensitivity.
Exactly.
Oh
so
my goodness.
It was a mess. Anyway, so I was really glad to get off of that when they did one that actually did something in 2005. And I literally woke up and said to the nurse, "Whose heartbeat is that?"
Oh.
And she said, "That's your heartbeat." And I said, "No, it can't be." And she says, "What do you mean?" And I said, "That's a regular heartbeat. That is not my heartbeat, because my heartbeat doesn't beat regularly."
Hi, my name is Jamie Alcroft, and I just published my new book, The Tin Man Diaries. It's an amazing story of my sudden change of heart as I went through a heart and liver transplant. I can think of no better way to read The Tin Man Diaries than to cuddle up in your favorite Hearts Unite the Globe sweatshirt and your favorite hot beverage, of course, in your Hearts Unite the Globe mug, both of which are available at the Hug Podcast Network online store, or visit heartsunitetheglobe.org.
Heart to Heart with Anna is a presentation of Hearts Unite the Globe and is part of the Hug Podcast Network. Hearts Unite the Globe is a non-profit organization devoted to providing resources to the congenital heart defect community to uplift, empower, and enrich the lives of our community members. If you would like access to free resources pertaining to the CHD community, please visit our website at www.congenitalheartdefects.com for information about CHD, the hospitals that treat children with CHD, summer camps for CHD survivors, and much, much more.
Aubyn, before the break, we were talking with you about your ablations. But now I want to talk to you about your future and also about your present and living in heart failure. So why don't you start by telling me about the tests that you're waiting for and what the doctors hope to learn from those tests?
So if we go back a little bit, the two most recent ablations in 2016 and then again in 2018 were unfortunately unsuccessful. So I am still having the arrhythmias, still having the palpitations, still on heart meds that are they're exhausting. They help me so that my heart doesn't overbeat, but by doing so, I have things like I sweat a lot, my hands and feet swell up, I'm exhausted a fair amount of the time. I've gained weight.
Well, I'm sure some of the weight gain is the fluid that you're retaining.
And also the fact that, surprise, surprise, when you're waiting for tests and not sure what's going to be happening, you're anxious, you're depressed. Mm-hmm. And in my world, that means I eat and maybe don't eat the things I should. And
you're probably not exercising because you're having these heart palpitations. And so it's this horrible cycle
it is absolutely
not helping you.
Absolutely. Okay. So at this point, I'm sort of in limbo land, I call it, which is my least favorite place in the world.
Yes.
Because limbo land means, to me, I feel like I can't plan.
Yeah.
Because I don't know.
Sure.
I don't know when. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if the one test will lead to another test. So we're waiting on an MRI. That's what we're waiting on.
Okay.
And my understanding is the MRI actual machine that we're waiting on has been lent from the Ottawa Heart Institute to another hospital. So isn't even in the building at the moment. Yeah.
Now, and it's not possible for you to go to the other building where it is to have the test?
I guess I need to be more serious before that were to happen. I imagine that I would have to be higher on a list, I guess.
Okay. So in a way, that's a blessing, but it's not a blessing because you're living in limbo.
Exactly. Exactly. And living in limbo can be very frustrating.
Of course.
It's how do I want to use my energy today?
Right.
Every day.
Sure.
Some days are better than others. Certainly some temperatures are better than others. The anxiety and depression and the overeating and those kinds of things, and the not knowing when the test is going to be, what the test is going to entail. The anxiety about the test. I mean, I've never had an MRI.
Sure.
So I don't know what that's like. And I'm claustrophobic, so I don't really want to have one. But my doctor told me that this was the best way to see what they need to see. So I said, okay. And that was 6 months ago.
Oh, wow. So you still have a ways to go, and you don't know
exactly
how long you have to go. So I know that Canada has socialized medicine, and you know I'm in the States, and we don't. So I have to ask a question about socialized medicine.
Certainly.
Since I don't know much. Does this mean that you're on a waiting list, and that once the machine is back in your hospital, they'll start ticking off the people from the top of the list to the bottom?
Correct.
Or is it prioritized by severity of condition?
A bit of both. As I understand it, a bit of both. So God forbid if my condition became acute and I ended up in ER, which is what we call the emergency rooms. I don't know if that's what you call your emergency rooms. But if I ended up in the ER of the hospital that is connected physically to the Heart Institute, I potentially could get an MRI faster.
Aha. Okay. Now, when we were talking earlier today, before we started the show, you told me that you had some PET tests done. And Aubyn and I had to look it up because we couldn't remember what it meant. But so for those of you who are curious, it's positron emission tomography. And so they did have that test to gain some information. What do they hope to learn with the MRI that they haven't learned with the PET?
My understanding is now they're starting to look at the idea that it's my coart that's causing my problems and not my bicuspid aortic valve or my irregular heartbeats and those kinds of things. And when you think about it, that kind of makes sense.
It really does.
It was done when I was 7, which was quite a long time ago.
Sure.
So it is entirely possible that that is the problem. And what that means, I am not entirely sure, other than I do know people get heart valves replaced. I do know they have options of what kind of heart valves they use. And beyond that, I am not really sure what other possibilities are out there for me because we haven't had that talk yet.
Right. My son was diagnosed with a coarctation of the aorta when he was diagnosed with his heart defect, and his coarctation was taken care of during his first open heart surgery. But one of the things that the surgeon said to me was, it's not uncommon for these coarctations to recur. And so we're going to have to keep our eye on that. And I imagine the same is true for you. And if you do have a coarctation that has recurred, they may need to fix that.
Yes.
and that may have nothing to do with your valve. But I was surprised to learn you had a bicuspid aortic valve for such a long time and that they haven't ever done any kind of valve surgery on you. There are so many options now. There's the Ross procedure where they take the pulmonary valve and they switch out your aortic valve with your pulmonary valve so it's native tissue, and so there's less likelihood for anything to go wrong with it. And then they replace the pulmonary valve, which doesn't have to work as hard as the aortic valve, with either a pig valve or a cow valve or a mechanical valve. And so I expected you to tell me that you were having valve surgery. I was really surprised when that wasn't the case. So what is your hope for your future?
Well, firstly, to answer the valve question, my regurg is mild to moderate. So it's not severe enough for them to, I'm sort of in that middle range. So I'm not severe enough to look at replacement at this time. That's why that's not good. On the.
That's really good.
That's why that's not on it. As for my hopes for the future, I mean, obviously, I hope that I get some kind of surgery, some kind of procedure, some kind of medication, some magic pill. Wouldn't that be nice? That
that would be nice.
That helps me feel better, that allows me to have a better quality of life. My husband is going to be retiring in 3 years, and our hope is to travel North America, not necessarily outside of North America, but still to do that, I would like to feel better and be able to do more, have more energy, live a happy retirement. That would be my hope.
Well, what advice do you have for people who, like you, are living with heart failure, have the low energy, have the edema? Have you found any tips or tricks to help you improve your quality of life?
There are a few, actually, and one of them is, for my sake, I am a very good advocate, and I feel that I need to be a very good advocate, not only for myself, but for my family in other situations as well. But one of the things I've learned over the past 15 years is if I don't ask the questions, then I'm not going to get the answers.
That's so true.
So I ask a lot of questions. I come with my notebook. I am the first person to say to my doc, sit down. This isn't going to be a 5-minute conversation. You know me, and I phone my nurse practitioner. If I have comments, questions, concerns, I phone the nurse practitioner. I leave her a message. She calls me back. I've been involved and am involved in some organizations up here in Canada that are to do with heart failure, to do with CHD patients. And I've learned a lot from a lot of other patients and a lot of other people who have CHD patients in their lives. And that's been priceless to me. And the other for me really is use my energy wisely. So I don't know if you've ever heard of the spoon theory, but quickly, basically what it says is you have so many spoons in a day. What do you want to use those spoons on?
Okay.
And so certain things like groceries, they take a lot of energy from me.
Yes. Yeah.
Because walking around the grocery store is tiring.
Sure.
So we order our groceries online. I pick them up at the grocery store. They put them in my SUV, and I come back home with my groceries having been done by someone else, and they bring them home, and then my son puts them away, or at least brings them in the house and then helps me put them away. It saves spoons for me.
Yeah, brilliant.
It was one of my biggest spoon wasters. We need food. You need to eat. You need to grocery shop. We don't need to go during the weekend like everybody else does because I am at home. But at the same time, do I really want to waste my spoons on doing groceries?
Yeah, when it's so easy to just do it online. And I know here in Texas, we have a grocery store chain called H-E-B, and H-E-B upcharges, I think it's really nominal, 2 or 3%. And if you're trying to save spoons, that 2 or 3% is totally worth it.
Absolutely. And I think for me, it is super important for me to get out of the house when I can, when the weather is nice. I mean, we do have cold, long winters up here. And so it's important for me to get out and see people and go see my neighbor and go see friends and do those kinds of things and save my spoons for those good things.
I love it. That's brilliant advice. I'm so glad that you came on the program, Aubyn. Thank you so much for sharing your stories with us today.
You're very welcome.
Well, friends, if you've enjoyed this episode of Heart to Heart with Anna, please consider becoming a patron of our program. For the cost of a pizza, you could be a patron for an entire year. We have all kinds of benefits for those of you who would like to support the program. Just head on over to Patreon. That's www.patreon.com/heart-to-heart, and you can learn more and join our team. And that concludes this episode of Heart to Heart with Anna. Thanks for listening today. And remember, my friends, you are not alone.
Thank you again for joining us this week. We hope you have been inspired and empowered to become an advocate for the congenital heart defect community. Heart to Heart with Anna, with your host Anna Jaworski, can be heard every Tuesday at 12 noon Eastern Time.